2020 has been the longest year ever, but it's finally November, which means election day is just around the corner. Or maybe it'll be election week, or election month, or even longer this year. But rather than just giving you a generic, go vote if you haven't already, and if you don't, my cat will bite you message, which Tipsy is fierce if you haven't met her yet. Rather than do that, I wanted to talk about how my transition helped me realize the importance of voting and political involvement. So if you're able to honestly say that voting and politics and all of that don't at all matter to you, if you're able to honestly say this, then likely, at least partially, that comes from a place of knowing that you'll be okay regardless of election and legislative decisions for the most part. A place of privilege and complacency is a much more concise way of phrasing that, in my opinion. And I bring this up because this is a place I was in well before my gender transition. And I'd be curious to hear if other people were in this place too at any point earlier in their journey. I was miserable, depressed, isolated, lonely, disconnected. I could probably go on, but because the world saw me as a white, cisgender, heterosexual man before I transitioned, I did not have to care about politics very much because someone who is associated with all of those identities typically don't have to worry about anything when it comes to things like equality and civil rights. Receiving identity-based privileges, it's often more important to consider who and what you're perceived to be, not necessarily what identities you actually hold. This relates back to that whole idea of passing I just talked about in that other video. You get privilege if you pass as the accepted majority identity, regardless of how you may actually identify or just how you actually are. It's this idea of you pass as cisgender. You're more likely to get those positive societal and social privileges. Earlier in life, I may not have wanted these privileges or identified with them, but that doesn't change the fact that I got them. They allowed me to not have to care about politics, even if it wasn't until after I started my transition that I was able to retrospectively put those pieces together and kind of realize that these privileges were able to make my life easier in some ways. Even though my life was miserable, it allowed me to miserably float through with less barriers than some people. On that note, though, I do want to emphasize that piece of just feeling completely lost and miserable in this world, it made it so hard to motivate myself to be involved in community and societal and political change when I didn't even know how to change what I didn't like about myself. For many years I was too scared to even try to figure out what exactly that it was I didn't like about myself. Or, I knew what it was, but it was scary to confront it. It was scary to acknowledge it. It was scary to be like, maybe I should do something about this, because then that makes it real. My way of coping for many, many years was just finding any way to distract myself from me. Distract myself from feeling like there was something wrong with me for knowing from the age of 3 onward that I was different. Distract myself from a world that constantly just felt painful to simply exist in. I've talked about how transitioning allowed me to open up doors to making positive changes in other areas of my life. How I could not figure out many things I wanted to do with my life until I figured out who I was. It was like that first piece of the puzzle. Realizing that I could transition and could live my life to be the woman I always knew myself to be the woman I always wanted to be, opened up so many doors for me. And one of those doors was a passion for helping a community that I was a part of. Now, I do quickly want to say that life is obviously very much harder in many ways as a result of being both trans and a woman. So what I mean by opening doors is like removing mental blockages, removing the barriers that were stopping me from living a fulfilling life, those internal conflicts, those internal struggles. Because certainly being an out lesbian trans woman has closed many doors for me in a societal perspective, but it has opened doors internally to help me figure out myself and my journey and what I want to do with my life. As far as voting in politics go, well, it was really through one of my closest friends, Melina, that I was able to really put those pieces together of why I needed to be involved politically and how it's very much intertwined with my journey and what's important to me. I met her way back in March of 2016, less than 6 months after coming out full time. And we were going to political events within weeks of meeting each other, maybe even within 1 week of meeting each other. Whether it was town halls or interviewing local candidates to get their stance on various issues on, women and trans people, or even starting our own organization dedicated to pro-trans political activism. Soon after this, I filed paperwork to run as a write-in candidate for a county commission seat in the November 2016 election. I never would have thought that I would ever run for office, but I ran for office not necessarily to try to become elected, not necessarily to win the election, but to create broader conversations on issues faced by trans people and the LGBT community more broadly. Issues that really no one else who was running in these races was talking about. And I put win in quotes earlier because I figured whether I win or lose the actual election, whether I get voted into office, it's a win from another perspective. Because regardless of the outcome of the votes, regardless of the outcome of who wins the seat, more and more people were becoming aware of trans issues. That was one of the key parts of running for office and getting involved politically. Not only this awareness piece, but just generally educating, creating community, just helping people see that I and other trans people are deserving of rights just as much as everyone else. We're people, we're humans. We have so many things we want in life. We just want to be able to exist and do what we want, be who we are, and be with who we want to be with. Not too much to ask for in my opinion, but it is for a lot of people out in the world still. My friend Melina, she really helped me realize that I could be more directly involved in community, social, and political change. That whole cheesy saying, be the change you want to see in the world. I do want to briefly acknowledge it is bittersweet talking about Melina. Some of you may have seen the videos I posted earlier this year, I believe back in March, with her, where I interviewed her about her journey of running for a Florida Senate seat. And it's bittersweet because she unfortunately passed away very recently. And I don't plan on talking about that aspect too much here, and I don't know if I am going to talk about that too much on my YouTube channel, because it is still very recent, still very much processing that. But I bring her up not to seek sympathy or pity or anything like that here, but, I bring her up because she was such a crucial part of my journey in becoming me. She's very critical in this specific piece of politics and the importance of voting and figuring all that shit out for myself, but she's also just a critical part of me being who I am today. She's been in my journey almost the entire time I've been out, and I think it's just one of those things that I feel like is important to do, to try to do at least a little bit of justice by her and the profound impact that she's had not only on me but so many other people. Like, she changed the face of politics throughout many parts of Florida in very positive ways, not just running for office, but, being involved in various women's organizations and trans organizations throughout the state. She's part of this larger fight of getting more and more trans voices represented in our systems. And, this is one of the reasons why voting is important. Getting our voices out there. It's especially important for communities like ours, communities that are underrepresented and marginalized. And when voting is not enough or does not feel like enough, we can get more directly involved too. Running for office is obviously one of those ways, but that is certainly daunting. And I could only imagine what it would be like to do it in a much more conservative area as an out trans woman. But we can also get involved with helping other people with their campaigns. uplifting other people running for office, whether they're, trans themselves or running a very pro-trans and pro-LGBTQ plus platform, helping out with advocacy organizations that help push forth pro-trans legislation, and just generally community support organizations that provide those spaces to give resources to the community, to provide social support and emotional support. Like I said, I obviously did not win that election I ran for, but I was able to see conversations changing. I was able to again open up doors for me and other people in the community to get our voices represented more. So again, that's why I considered it a win in many ways, because changing the conversation, changing societal attitudes, whether it's, very broadly across the country or very specifically in a local community, that is needed. In order to change the politics, you need to change the minds that are influencing those politics. Through my transition, I've realized that I am part of a community that has constantly been in a fight for equality and equity. I realize that we've come so very far, but we still have so far to go, especially with all of the pushback trans community is often getting. It's kind of that 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We're getting more awareness, we're getting more rights, but that awareness and rights makes people who don't know anything about us uncomfortable, which causes a pushback. This is how transition helped me realize the importance of voting and being part of the change. The fact that I am living my most fulfilling life, but the fact that it is such a fight to live authentically in this world, especially if living authentically does not look like what society expects of you. Now, I do realize that some of what I said here is a bit cheesy, and, in many ways I'm probably preaching to the choir as I do in some of these videos. A lot of you out there know this and have lived this, but I feel like it's important to again put these messages out there, and I mean everything that I'm saying. But what about all of you? How is your transition or being transgender factored into your decision to vote? Or how might it have factored into being involved in politics and social change in other ways? And were you like me, and did you find it difficult to be involved until you were able to be yourself? I'd love to hear all that and more down in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for watching. Tipsy and I love you all so very much and hope that you're staying as safe and healthy as you can during these tough times. And of course, if you have not done so already, please be sure to give this a big thumbs up, hit that like button, subscribe button, and notification bell. Bye for now.